Winter is 5 years old. Throughout her whole life, she's lived in temporary accommodation. Her mum, Yasmin, doesn't like to invite friends round because she says she's embarrassed by the state of the damp and mould.
There's damp in nearly every single room, every room. When I moved in, the toilet was leaking into the back garden. There was tissue, faeces, everything all over the garden. A cockroach got through the front door frame, which is like rotted, it's rotted wood. There was fleas everywhere in all the carpets, jumping off the windowsills, biting my door, like in the bed.
So Winter actually had bite marks on her?
Oh yeah, I've got pictures and stuff. She got bit all up her body, from legs to top.
The family previously spent months in hotels and hostels across Manchester. They were then offered this property until they can be rehoused permanently. As we're filming, we hear evidence of another problem.
I can actually hear something.
Yeah.
It sounds like something's creeping around.
It's stuck, I think. It's been there all day. I'm just really scared. I'm scared that it's just gonna... Can you hear it?
I can hear the mouse.
And it's not the first time Yasmin has caught a mouse. The council has to pay £800 a month to rent this property because it doesn't have enough social housing to accommodate everyone in the city who needs it. Winter and Jasmine aren't alone. New research by the charity Shelter, seen by Channel 4 News, shows that more than 230,000 people are registered as homeless in England, and that includes 123,000 children. With the pressure on social housing, temporary accommodation is anything but. The government told us that temporary accommodation is a last resort and that councils have been given £366 million this year to prevent evictions. But the numbers are growing every day. At Manchester's Civil Court, we listened to dozens of cases in which families faced losing their homes. So is it because of the cost of living crisis you feel that you're seeing more and more people?
Absolutely.
Kirsty Almond helps tenants in both social and private housing who are faced with eviction across Manchester and Merseyside.
What I noticed in court was that there were people from all different backgrounds who are up for eviction because there's a perception that it's people on benefits in social housing, but that's not what we saw in court.
No, not at all. We advise social tenants, private tenants. We also advise those who are unable to keep up repayments with the mortgages. People are losing jobs and rents are increasing and people just simply can't afford to keep up with those rents. So we're seeing more frequently that there isn't anything that we can do to keep people in the homes.
The number of people living in temporary accommodation has sharply risen by 74% in the last 10 years, and more than 2/3 of those families have been there for over a year.
In the short term, the government needs to unfreeze housing benefit. That's urgent. But they also need to supply homes that people on low incomes can actually afford to rent. And by that, I mean social rent housing.
What's the worst thing about being in temporary accommodation?
That you just have no freedom, no rights, and you're just a number. And I can't decorate, I can't have my own personality. I have to keep boxes all over the house, just in case we have to move tomorrow.
The council might say to you that, you know, at least you're not in a hotel now, you've got a house, you're luckier than a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll just wait in my turn, basically.
And you've got no idea when that turn will come?
Nope.
Manchester City Council told us they're very concerned that Yasmin has had such an unsatisfactory experience, and they're working to resolve the issues as soon as possible. They said there's a national issue with the quality of private rented accommodation and considerable pressure locally on temporary provision.
What are your hopes now for yourself and for your daughter, Winter?
To get out of here as fast as possible. It's looking as though she is going to grow up in temporary accommodation unless the council want to change something. Maybe build more houses, I don't know. But it's going to be a long time. She's going to be nearly grown up.
Darshna Soni reporting there. Well, earlier I spoke to Lord Bob Kerslake, the former head of the Civil Service who used to run the Communities and Local Government Department. He now chairs the Kerslake Commission on Homelessness and Rough Sleeping. I began by asking him for his reaction to the scale of homelessness in England.
Well, it's a shocking figure, but I'm afraid not surprising. This has been building for a number of years, and whilst the government have taken measures to address some of the most acute issues on homelessness, particularly rough sleeping, I'm afraid the core problem we have in this country is that we're not building enough genuinely affordable homes.
I mean, that is the fundamental problem. That has been a problem in successive governments of different political hues. Most recently, housing targets, which councils were supposed to observe, were watered down after a rebellion by Conservative MPs. So how do political parties get round this kind of NIMBYism? How do they address that?
Well, it's a good question. And it's not just that we need to build more homes. We specifically need to build more homes that are genuinely affordable for rent, because really those are the houses that people who are at risk of becoming homeless need to go into. And the problem, I'm afraid, has been exacerbated by the rising cost of living and the rising level of rents. In London, they're soaring. And I'm afraid the housing allowance, the so-called local housing allowance, that sets the level of benefits just hasn't kept pace. So you're finding, if you like, more people coming into homelessness and fewer opportunities to house them.
I mean, the government has said it's given these cost of living payments. There's a £2 billion household support fund. It sounds like a lot of money. Is it not, in your view?
Well, I'm afraid it's not matching the scale of the challenge. That's the problem. If you talk to any local authority, if you talk to any organisation working in the homelessness sector, they will give you the same story, that after a period where we've seen rough sleeping particularly fall and homelessness fall, it's starting to rise again. I think the government need to just wake up to the scale of the problem. I think also, by the way, we're going to have to look at some different ways of getting more genuinely affordable homes available for those in temporary accommodation more quickly. It's just worth saying that this is the worst of all worlds. You know, the cost of temporary accommodation is huge, and the experience of those who are in it is terrible, absolutely terrible in many, many occasions. So we have to see the scale of the problem and do something about it.
There is a renters reform bill on the books which should make legislation later this year. How urgent is that, particularly in the context of evictions on the rise, and it would end no-fault evictions, that bill?
We urgently need to get on with the Renters Reform Bill, which will give greater protections to those in rented accommodation. But we will still have the problem that rents are rising way ahead of people's ability to pay and for them to fund it through benefits when they need to. So it will help, undoubtedly, but it won't be a complete answer to the issue. And it certainly won't address our desperate need to get more genuinely affordable homes for rent being built.
What are the repercussions if this government fails to act, or if the next government, could be a Labour government, fails to build enough houses once again?
I think it's soaring costs of temporary accommodation, and it's more human misery and more anxiety and uncertainty to people. So it's a lose-lose situation here. Government loses out because it has to foot the bill, and those involved lose out as well. It really is essential that we have a much stronger programme of building genuinely affordable homes, and action now really to avoid people going into homelessness. More action.
Lord Kerslake, thanks very much.
Thank you.